everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Steven. This is Northwest Small Batch Brewing, and I'm filming this on St. Patrick's Day. I realize you're not going to be watching it on St. Patrick's Day, but cheers. At any rate, this is my homemade Irish Red. I'll put a link to that video. It was a little bit ago, up in the corner, that you can take a peek at if you want. Today's video is a brew talk about efficiency. Now, I've got videos about efficiency, or at least one video about efficiency. By the way, if you didn't know, I have something like 200 videos or something on my channel right now. You can always go to a YouTube channel's homepage, and up in the top right corner, do a search of videos just on their page. So, for example, if you search my page for efficiency, there should be at least one other video. But I want to do a little update here, because it's always something that comes up. I'm not going to explain about what efficiency is in this video. You can watch my other video where I go into more detail explaining what that is. But basically, the question is, what are some tips that we can do to increase our efficiency, right, when we're brewing, especially with all grain brewing, right? So I've got 4 tips, maybe a 5th bonus one if we're lucky and I have time. So let's get started, shall we? And I'm sure, by the way, before you put comments, I am sure there are far more tips than this. This is just 5, the ones I'm going to list, or 4 or 5. But I guarantee there's more. So if you have tips how to increase efficiency that I don't list here, feel free to post your tips in the comments. It will help everybody out. So number 1. So this one's interesting because so I do what's called a full volume mash, which means that I use the full amount of water that I need for the entire beer all one go. So if I'm doing a 5-gallon batch of beer, I want to end with 5. Well, I actually usually do 5.5 to account for true loss, but I usually start with somewhere around 7 gallons of water. Now, if you have a smaller pot, smaller system, you can't do that big a batch. You're going to do a smaller batch of water. You can still do 5 gallons of beer at the end, but you're going to what? You're going to have to dilute that finished product down because it's going to be more concentrated than what I'm making. Does that make sense? So number 1 thing for efficiency, if you're not doing a full volume mash, sparging is what you should be doing, right? Don't just add water to dilute your wort. Pour it through the grain because you're going to rinse more of the sugars off. In addition, pour it slowly. Traditionally, sparging can take 30 minutes to an hour. I mean, it's that slow, okay? Obviously, it depends on how big your batch is and what there's different ways to sparge, but whatever method you're using to sparge, if you are sparging, the slower, the better, because it takes time. If you do it too fast, you're just pouring straight through the grain. You're not really rinsing it. You want to try to get it sort of, the easiest way if you have no equipment is to pour it over the back of kind of a big soup spoon or something so that it sort of cascades. But you, again, want to do it as slowly as possible to get as much of that sugar off with remaining sugar off the grain. All right, spent too much time on number 1 tip. Number 2, let's talk about loss. All right, I'm specifically talking about, I call it dead loss. So, for example, a lot of people have a false bottom in the bottom of their pot. There's a space between the false bottom and the bottom of the kettle that's dead loss, right? Your hoses, if you are using a lot of hoses, which, by the way, I've eliminated in my claw hammer system. I don't use hoses except for just transferring the beer out of the vessel now. But if you're using a pump and vessels, and that's the other thing, pumps, right? Those tubing and the hoses, right, and the pump, it all is going to retain some of your wort. And so there's dead loss there, and the more that you can eliminate that dead loss, the more it will help your efficiency. Tip number 3. This one most homebrewers know, but I can't leave it out because it's probably the most important, and that is milling your grain. So if you're doing a brew in the bag, you want to mill your grain pretty much as finely as you can. I do brew in the bag, and I have my mill set to the tightest setting it can go. Forget the credit card width setting, tight as you can go. And I mill my grain twice. So it's not a powder because these grain mills are not meant to make flour. It's not that kind of mill. But you want it as finely ground up as you can. Now, of course, the caveat is you really should throw in a few big handfuls of rice hulls after you've milled the grain to make up for the fact that you've really destroyed most of the outer husk of the grain, and that's not going to help you with your grain bed. So that will really help your efficiency. Number 4 tip. I really hate to say it. That's a big sigh for me because I have a hard time saying this one. Y'all know that I really don't believe in mashing out. Mashing out is where you raise the temperature to about 170 Fahrenheit. It basically kills the enzymes. It cooks them. Basically, the enzymes. So you're not going to be able to get any more sugar, no matter what, out of that grain, right? And so I just don't see the point as a home brewer, because as a home brewer, it doesn't matter. Commercial brewing, you have to lock in your gravity numbers so that your beer is the same gravity every time. In the homebrew level, we aren't that concerned about it. If you're a couple points or whatever above or below what you were expecting, it's really not a big deal. So mashing out is not going to hurt, but it's also really not something, that's that necessary. That being said, if you are a sparger, right, as I was talking about earlier, it can help to use a hotter water, a hotter sparge, when you rinse your grains, because you can imagine you're going to get more sugar to kind of melt off of the remaining grains if you use hotter water. So I would say the caveat for mashing out is that if you do sparge, mashing out could potentially get you more sugar off the grain. I don't have a way to quantify that. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but I can see that being a reason to mash out at a higher temperature. All right, I do have time for a tip, number 5. And this one you can't do much about unless you're changing your system, but the shape of your kettle or your mash, vessel matters. So ideally, your grain mash, is going to be about the same height as it is wide. Okay? It just gives you the best surface area, and it's just the perfect, amount. So if you're using one of those coffee urn style systems, you're going to have probably a little bit less efficiency because they are very tall but skinny. So your mash is being kind of put through a tube, right? And you're not going to get as good efficiency. So I have always had better luck with the fat vessels, the fat kettles that you put on the burners, or you have an electric brew in the bag, like electric thing, but either way, that's been my kind of experience. So if you're looking for a new system, that might be something to consider, is the shape of the vessel that you're considering. All right, I've gone plenty long enough on this. If you have more tips, make sure you put them in the description, because I know there are more ways to affect your efficiency. This is just some of the 5 main ones. Hey, I appreciate being here. Stay till the end. I'll be back in another week for another video, and until then, keep on brewing. Cheers.